All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Meeting Texas Financial Aid, or FAFSA and TASFA requirements with the class of 2022. This is a really big topic for this year. We've done several different trainings throughout the summer in prep for this legislative requirement, where all of our students are required to do financial aid starting this school year. So we've got lots of questions, lots of updates on both FAFSA and TASFA that we are going to cover. And so we will probably be here for the full hour. But like I said, we will share the recording with you if you have colleagues that would like this information, or you have someone that registered and was not able to join us live. So we will follow up with an email. So as many of you know, we're at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and with Texas OnCourse, our mission is that all Texas students, no matter where they come from or where they're headed, have a plan for success after high school. The webinars that we record all go on our YouTube channel. So if you have not liked or subscribed to that YouTube channel, that's a great way to search all of our videos. You can get notifications when we have new ones, and you can also search by topic. So if you want to take just a second and like that YouTube channel, we have lots of great material and videos that are there for you. So here's our agenda for this morning. We just want to give a quick welcome to everyone. We have lots of people joining us this morning and some great guest speakers. And Josie Bruner from TEA is going to cover the financial aid requirements. TEA has a lot of great information. I think a lot of the questions that we've heard already are going to be answered by her. And she is in the CCMP division at TEA. And then Jaslyn Green is going to cover from Texas OnCourse, our Director of Content and Resources, is going to cover some really important FAFSA requirements, just updates and changes, because as you all know, just when you get used to something, it changes the next year. And then we will switch gears and talk a little bit about some TASFA information from Sam Kimmel, who's our program coordinator at Texas OnCourse for high school. And then we have a couple of resources that we've worked on with TEA that are now on our website. So we will spotlight those and also have some time just for final questions as we wrap up the webinar toward 11 a.m. And my name's Laura Guggen. We've been doing this webinar series for several years now. I'm Director of Program Implementation at Texas OnCourse, and we work directly with the school districts that are using our resources. Josie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Josie Bruner. I'm the data strategist at College Career and Military Prep at TEA. And I did want to thank the Texas OnCourse team. They've been a fantastic partner through all of this. And I do want to thank all of you for being here, because this is important work that you're doing. And so I am happy to hopefully answer a lot of questions on the financial aid application requirement today.
Perfect. Thank you, Josie. We're so glad you could join us. Jaslyn?
Good morning, everyone. I'm actually now Jaslyn Rose, so I have to remember to update that everywhere. But I'm the Director for Content and Resources on the Texas OnCourse Initiative. So I manage all of our content and information, background in college access and success. I'm excited to share a few updates regarding the FAFSA application this morning.
Hi, everyone. Sam Kimmel here. I work on the content and resources team with Jocelyn. As Laura mentioned, I oversee the high school content. So I've been working with TEA around developing resources to support everybody on the financial aid requirement. And I'm happy to be here today to talk about a few TASFA updates and the resource spotlight.
Great. Thank you to everyone covering information today. I think you'll all find it really valuable. So before we go ahead and talk about the requirement, if you just want to go ahead and put a thought or a question that you have in the chat, this is kind of how we like to see what folks are curious about in our webinars. what questions do you have about the financial aid requirement this year? We will likely answer many of them, but if there are things that you've observed or you are hoping that we're going to cover, all of our participants are muted because of the webinar format that we're in. Great, I see a couple of ideas already. Tracking who's applied, how will we track? How does the state want districts to keep track of this information? Proof. I know, Josie, you have some of those questions in your slides. TASFA students. I see lots of process questions. Transcript questions, deadlines. These are great. Wonderful. So feel free to keep adding those. Accurately monitoring. These are wonderful. So no real big surprises, but I think it's great because we have a lot of this in our presentation. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over to Josie from TEA to talk about the graduation requirement.
Good morning. So again, I'm Josie Brunner, and if you noticed in my title, I am a data strategist. I do program evaluation, and my passion is high school to college transition. But with this requirement, it is a lot of data, and I do see that there are a lot of questions about tracking. So we do know that this is not necessarily an easy process to track, and it is very intensive when it comes to data. Go ahead, next slide, please. So again, I am situated in college, career, military prep, and our primary responsibility is helping with TEA's strategic priority 3, and that is to connect high school to career and college. So all of this information about the financial aid graduation requirement does reside within our counseling and advising and student support programs within CCMP. Next slide. So basically today, I'm hoping that I will be able to answer most questions. We are working on an FAQ. So at the end of this meeting, I will download all of the chats and questions, and hopefully we can get anything that is not covered today in that FAQ for you. But today I will be covering the general overview of the requirement. I will be going through very quickly the opt-out form, discussing the method of proof and reporting. And then hopefully at the end of this session, we'll be able to get to some of your other questions that were not addressed. Next slide. So as you're aware, we have the requirement for the graduating class of 2022, and more specifically, the seniors of 2022. I saw that there were a few questions about what does the cohort of 2022 represent. So within statute, it does start with 12th graders. However, going forward, it will include anybody who does graduate. But for the 21-22 school year, all 12th graders, in order to graduate, must 1, complete and submit a FAFSA, or complete and submit a TASFA. Or finally, the only exemptions that we do recognize is that they submit a signed opt-out form, or if the district does not provide an opt-out form, then you cannot hold it against that student. But currently, that is the only exemption that is recognized within the statute. Next slide. So during the past year, TEA has been doing a lot to try to get everything in order for the graduation requirement. So back last fall, we did have an advisory committee composed of districts, IHEs, and other external parties that usually help with the completion of the financial aid applications, convened to talk about the requirement and to make recommendations. Those recommendations were submitted to the Texas legislature in a report that was due January 1st of this past year. And that report is available on our website. Finally, we did have all of the new data elements approved for this coming year for TREX, and also for next year, TSDS PEEMS. We've also developed the opt-out form. And this past April, we did have the SBOE rules adopted. And finally, we do have the commissioner rules that hopefully will be approved this October. As soon as they are approved, we will have some more information and resources about those rules. Next slide. All information regarding the financial aid requirement can be found through our website. Again, this is housed in College Career Military Prep. At the bottom of the slide, which I believe will be shared, you can find a direct link to the financial aid requirement. On this website, you can find the commissioner rules once adopted, the SBOE rules. Also, you can find the forms for opt-out, which include forms for in English and in Spanish. We do have some information and we'll be posting more guidelines on reporting. And then also all the Texas On-Course resources, we do have links to. So you'll have the training and resources there, as well as additional guidance that TEA will be putting out as soon as the commissioner rules are adopted. We know sort of the final requirements. Next slide, please. So with the opt-out form, there are 3 different ways that a student may opt out of this requirement for graduation. First, you can have a parent or a guardian submit the form. The student also has to sign. There have been a lot of questions about whether or not the parent has to provide a reason for why they want to opt their student out. I just want to note that option 1 and option 2, which is the parent opt-out, and also for students who are 18 or older or who are emancipated minors, they do not have a requirement to provide a reason for why they opt out of the financial aid graduation requirement. So that is not a requirement. We do have, however, an option 3 for the school counselor that they are able to authorize opt-out on behalf of the student based on good cause. So the good cause language, again, only applies to option 3. And then just another note, basically a student only needs to sign the form once. There are 3 signature lines for the student, but they only need to sign where applicable. Next slide. So again, I just want to remind people that the good cause language only applies to option 3 of the form. So again, we've been receiving a lot of questions about, especially for parents and the reasons that they may provide. Technically, the only thing that is needed is their signature. Next slide, please. And also, again, I just mentioned, a student only needs to sign once. So although there are 3 signature lines provided, they only need to sign where applicable. And again, option 1 is for any student who's 18 and older or an emancipated minor. Next slide. So the statute does state that students must present a method of proof that they've completed and submitted a financial aid application. So technically, the method of proof is decided through local policy. However, for the financial aid application through FAFSA, we do have within the SBOE rules additional methods of proof that can be used. So the first one is related to data that is found through the Applied Texas Counselor Suite. There are many districts that are already participating in this program, not all. So last when we checked, I think about 25% of districts were not yet registered for Apply Texas. We do encourage that you take advantage of this opportunity because you will have student level data where you're able to track this. So one of the ways that you can identify a student as completing and submitting is to look to see whether or not they have a date represented in the FAFSA process date field. We have had a few questions about the complete date versus the FAFSA process date. Through our discussions with USDE, it is the processed application in which information can be generated to provide to institutions. So this is sort of what we are using for now as the standard of whether or not a student has completed and submitted the FAFSA, mainly the definition of complete, so a completed application. If a student has any missing parts, they will receive notification. And so that's why, again, we're sort of relying on that process date. Also, a student can present notification from USDE that they've completed and submitted the FAFSA. Usually this comes in the form of an email confirmation. However, the district through local policy may adopt other alternative methods of proof in addition to these other two. And this might be like a screenshot of the FAFSA submission, financial aid award letters from an IHE, or anything else. The only thing is we hope that the local policy also keeps in mind the protection of student privacy as well. Next slide, please. In terms of TASFA, as you know, the TASFA process is not centralized. And so there's not a very good data source that can serve for TASFA. We do have an agreement with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board where we're working with them on the eTASFA. And hopefully there'll be a little bit more information about that later on in this webinar. However, for now, and especially for this school year, school districts must have a local policy for what they'll constitute that method of proof for a TASFA. So some examples that you might use, and again, you can use multiple examples, but an acknowledgement of receipt from an IHE. THECB is working really hard to try to communicate with IHEs how important this will be going forward. Also a copy of the signature page, again, screenshots for institutions that do have an electronic form, or anything else, again, established by local policy. Next slide, please. When it comes to reporting, what will occur this next year is the TREX reporting. So this will be very instrumental, especially for mobile populations where we will have seniors who will move from district to district. And so it's going to be very important for districts to provide that information through the Texas Records Exchange system. So we have two new elements that we've added. The first one being the financial aid application code itself. So this one will be whether or not they've completed a financial aid application, or next slide, please, whether they have opted out. So you could see the two codes right here. So code 2, which is the exception submitted, is the opt-out form. Again, currently it's our understanding that there is no other exemptions for public graduates. And so it's only through the opt-out form, or again, through SB 369. If a student was not provided that opt-out form, then the district cannot deny the student graduation. Next form, please. And then finally, we do have the date met for the financial aid requirement. I do want to emphasize that this date does not need to correspond with anything in Apply Texas. This is based on, again, on local policy of when they met the financial aid requirement and nothing more. So whatever that date is deemed, that also needs to be placed in TREX. We do encourage districts, however, the applications do not open until October 1st for the next academic year for financial aid. We do encourage districts to hopefully not have like an opt-out form prior to October 1st, especially for students who are not graduating until later, especially in the spring. This provides an opportunity to hopefully get more information out to parents and students so that they're more aware of exactly what these forms entail and how they can help them. Next slide, please. And then finally, for fall of 2022, districts will be reporting the financial aid application code in TSDS PEMS. This will be the data that actually TEA will have. So with TREX, again, that's more for LEA to LEA exchange. TSDS PEMS, that is the data that we will have. And the codes do mirror the same codes as what you find in TREX. So again, we're only asking for the financial application form. We do not ask which application they completed, and we ask whether or not they have signed an opt-out form, not the condition in which they signed. Next form, please. So in terms of the reporting timeline for the 22 graduates, you can see that the application for the 2022-2023 school year does not open until October 1st. So again, that's for financial aid for next academic year. In the spring, if students are using the current application, so there are 2 applications that will be out, and that is for financial aid for this academic year. And new applications close on June 30th. We have received questions about which application a student needs to complete. There is no requirement for which year in which a student completes an application. However, it should be applicable for when they do plan for college enrollment. So for example, if you do have a student who's graduating earlier, such as in the fall, perhaps they do want to apply for this current school year, but just be aware that those data are not available through the Apply Texas Counselor Suite. So one of the things that you'll notice in the box below for the Apply Texas Counselor Suite, the data that will be represented will be for the 22-23 application. And so you'll begin seeing those data in late October. And you'll have access to these data. They are updated on a daily basis from Monday through Friday. But at the end of September, those data for the 22-23 FAFSA will no longer be available. In terms of TASFA, we encourage that students do make an application from October 1st to mid-January, just to ensure that they do have priority for funding. Next slide, please. And if you do have any questions regarding financial aid, you can always send it to our CAS team at tea.texas.gov. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Josie, so much. I see lots of great questions. I'm gonna turn it over to Jaslyn, who's got some really good updates, and we may answer some of those. And then we'll get to some of the other ones at the end of the webinar.
Thanks, Laura. Good morning again, everyone. I'm going to just quickly talk about a few of the updates to the FAFSA application and a few tips for tracking the graduation requirement. Next slide, please. So as we all know, the FAFSA is a free application for federal student aid that offers access to federal aid programs like federal grants, federal loans, and also federal work study. The 2022-23 version, as Josie mentioned, will be available October 1. And when it comes to the FAFSA, there's definitely 3 deadlines to keep in mind. The state has a deadline, the schools themselves have a deadline, and then there's also the federal deadline that's typically June 30th. We just encourage everyone to complete the FAFSA by the earliest deadline. And one of the benefits, one of the changes this year will be that the application will have a visual update similar to the look and feel for the rest of the student aid homepage. One benefit to this change is that if a student has logged in anywhere on studentaid.gov using their account username and password, he or she will not have to provide those credentials again when they're accessing the FAFSA form in like the student role, or even if they are looking to use that data retrieval tool within the application. And if a student is navigating from the studentaid.gov website, the FAFSA form on the homepage, he or she will need to select apply for aid from the header and then select complete the FAFSA form. The student may also get to the FAFSA with the direct link, or they may arrive from that homepage that we just mentioned. The FAFSA form welcome will direct students to either select the Start Here button or returning users to just hit the login option. The students will be able to, and any user will actually be able to select a specific role. So there will be a student role, a parent role, and also a preparer who's helping a student complete the form before they actually enter into the form. So if a student selects the student role, on the next slide, we can kind of see what that'll look like. The form will ask the student to log in, create an FSA ID, or start the form with their personal identifiers. The student may also choose to begin the FAFSA form with those personal identifiers, and if they do so, it'll ask them just for their first name, last name, date of birth, and also social security number. And then once the student enters this information in, he or she will just select continue. If the student has an FSA ID account, he or she will be prompted to log in with those credentials. If not, the student can just select create an account. In the mobile application, we'll go through it pretty quickly. It'll have a similar look and feel and also update as well. Next slide, please. For the 2022-23 school year, Federal Student Aid has a virtual assistant, Aiden, who's been added to the My Student Aid mobile app to answer specific questions. Anyone who downloaded a previous version of the app will receive automatic update or will be prompted to download a new version depending on their mobile device settings. When the application opens the mobile app, he or she the student will initially log in to enter their FSA ID or log in with an existing FSA ID and just hit that login button. They can also create an FSA ID and also select to create an account. If they forgot their information, they could still use that forgot username and also forgot password, but an FSA ID is required to enter into the mobile app. This is a snapshot of just that dashboard from the mobile app view. So the student will land on this dashboard page. If the student has existing like federal grants or loan information, that current balance information will display. For this purpose, they don't have anything on file. To start the FAFSA application, they'll select FAFSA form within the access, the FAFSA forms title in that checklist, or the FAFSA icon in the footer of the page. And then they can begin, complete, or review the form by that highlighted tile that you see the little red box at the bottom. And then similar to the web version, the mobile app version will also allow for an individual to select the role that they're applying for, whether they're student, parent, or preparer. So again, they'll also have a similar look and feel. I wanted to share a few other updates. So this is every year, this is always confusing information for like, who's my parent when a student is filling out the application. So this is actually the first view of the parent demographic section. Before they were immediately just directed to enter their parents' information, but now there's a new view that's been developed that appears at the beginning of this section, really to help the student understand the correct parent's information to enter in. So this view provides a little bit more information about which parent should be entered based on the student's parents' marital status. The household size was also something that was a little confusing and kind of hard to see in the previous version of the application. And so for the new application cycle, the household size is calculated based on some of the previous questions that a parent and student will answer. The system has a cleaner summary, so you can quickly see the household size information. And then there's an option for the student, similar to the previous applications, to just enter the number of dependents who are currently in college, but definitely gives them a cleaner snapshot. A few other updates. One is selective service. So the response, although the question is there, to selective service will not determine or impact the student's eligibility to receive financial aid. And so that's a pretty big change that we also wanted to call out. Next slide, please. And similarly, the drug conviction no longer has an effect on financial aid eligibility. So as a student completes the form, they will be asked this question, but it doesn't have an impact on them receiving financial aid. And then as a student navigates through the form, again, they'll have an updated look and feel. They may complete the form and say they would like to make some corrections. And so the corrections page has also been updated. It also has a new look and feel. So the students who are eligible to complete a FAFSA correction will have the opportunity now to select update schools and just add a school, remove a school, or change their housing option. And this actually does not require them to sign their correction application. In the past, it did. So there's an easier way for a student to just go back and add a school. But if the student needed to make other changes, then that student would select edit FAFSA form to change incorrect information on that previous FAFSA submission. Similar to before, if they do need to edit any incorrect information, then that they'll have this option where they'll need to create that save key. And then this is another cleaner view that the student will have to jump in and out of each of the sections. So if there's a specific section that the student wanted to jump to, so maybe their financial information needs to be updated, there's a quick button that they would hit to enter that section and just update that specific information. So it definitely tries to provide a more cleaner view to help them with navigating quickly to the sections that they need to make any corrections to. And then after a student submits the application, if they are looking to track their status of their completed FAFSA, this will happen within the My Documents page. So they'll need to go to My Documents page, log in, and then they'll see at the top under their name in the top right corner, they'll need to select the My Documents option. Next slide. And then the student can view any relevant notifications in the notification center. So the student must be logged in to view any notifications, but if there aren't any, they'll see the bell icon in the top right corner, which will contain a little red circle with a number to indicate the number of notifications that they have. But this will be a great way for the students to follow up on the status of their application. This does not go into effect this application cycle, but still wanted to call it out that the EFC, or the expected family contribution, will have a new name change. And so the new name for it will be the Student Aid Index, or SIA, going into effect for the 23-24 application cycle. The goal really was to just simplify the system. Many people were really misunderstanding the EFC, and they thought this told them like how much they'll have to pay or how much aid they'll receive, but that's not the case. So the goal is to try to simplify that and make that much easier for parents and students to understand. And then I'll just close with a few tips here. So tip number one is to use the FAFSA demo site to explore the student view. Next slide, please. The demo site will be available on Sunday, September 26th right now. And so that's a great way for you to get in there, play around with some of the data, see what the site would look like if a student was an independent versus a dependent, so that you can get some of those questions answered that your students may have. And then tip number two is to use that Apply Texas Counselor Suite to track data. Next slide. And I did see a lot of questions in there about when it will be available. The goal is late October to have the Counselor Suite updated and available. Right now, as we mentioned in the previous webinar, there are a few technical issues that the team is working out on the student side. And so we're trying to get those resolved, but hoping that it will be available late October as the goal for the Counselor Suite. But once available, there'll be a really clean view so that you can see for each of the students, you'll be able to see if the student has completed a FAFSA, what the completion date was, what that process date was, and also whether or not they were selected for verification. And with that, I will turn it over to Sam Kimmel to share updates around the TASFA.
All righty, thank you so much, Jocelyn. Okay, so first off, let's see here. We'd love to hear a little bit from you guys just about some common issues that you face when completing a TASFA. I know you've already been going off in the chat here. I've seen a lot of questions and comments run through. Would love to get to all of them, but if you could go ahead and drop a line in the chat now, it would be greatly appreciated. Alrighty, definitely seeing some common themes come through already regarding hesitation from parents, concerns about filing taxes, possibly given certain citizenship situations, sending information to schools, the paper TASFA. Alrighty. Well, hopefully we will get to at least some of that today. If not, we will be pointing you guys to our website as a new resource we spotlighted, where hopefully you'll be able to answer any other questions we don't get to. But first off, just a little bit of clarification or just quick overview for anybody who isn't familiar. The TASFA is the Texas application for state financial aid. This is also a free application, and students can use to apply, complete it to apply for both state and institutional financial aid at institutions of higher education in Texas. And like the FAFSA, it becomes available on October 1st each year. And there is also a state priority deadline of January 15th, though similar to the FAFSA, students can submit their application through June 30th of the current academic year. So again, for this year's seniors, we're talking about June 30th of 2022. However, some of the different state aid programs that students may be eligible for by completing the TASFA, such as state grants or the state college access loan program, the Texas work study program, all of these have somewhat limited funding opportunities, and aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So we truly encourage all of our student supporters out there to really push students completing the TASFA to get that application in ahead of the state priority deadline. And if at all possible, well enough in advance so that they complete any, they can complete any follow-up steps needed to get the aid that they are applying for. And quickly just talk a little bit about the eligibility here as well regarding the TASFA. So this application is for students who are classified as Texas residents, but who are not eligible to apply for federal student aid through the FAFSA. I think sometimes there might be confusion because we talk about the FAFSA in terms of federal aid, and students do use it to apply for federal aid, but they also use that application to apply for state and institutional aid. So FAFSA students aren't missing out on anything by using that application. But when it comes to students who complete the TASFA, it is really important to make sure that students actually meet the requirements to establish in-state residency in the state of Texas. And there's essentially 4 provisions that students will need to meet, which we have listed here, if they're at least trying to claim that residency through their high school graduation. So this is an infographic that we have available, and I believe somebody will be dropping a link to it in the chat, but if not, we will make sure that you get it through our follow-up email and information on the website. Definitely something to share with students and their families during advising sessions or at a financial aid event, as well as just making sure that colleagues and other student supporters have it and understand who should complete the TASFA and when. And another note here, as we're working to help our students complete and submit the TASFA application this year, just want to highlight that additional materials might be needed either to complete the application or just for the college to actually process the student's aid award. We do not have a full or complete list of those forms here. I just want to make sure that maybe everybody is aware of some of the big ones. The first being a notarized affidavit of intent to become a permanent resident. This form is now available also through Apply Texas. As students are completing their college applications, they will see it there. Just another kind of plug. Students may also need copies of tax forms. I know there can be a lot of hesitancy if a student is undocumented and they may not be aware that they can file taxes or that their parents can file taxes. That is possible, even if you do not have a social security number, but you will need to apply for an individual taxpayer identification number or I-10 before doing so. And as we'll speak to in just a minute, and I think I saw somewhere in one of the Q&A or chat, males assigned male at birth, age 18 through 26, will need to also provide proof of their selective service registration or that they are exempt to be eligible and receive aid, state financial aid. Alrighty, and so quickly, just want to make sure everybody, encourage everyone to check the college's requirements, encourage your students to check the college's requirements for financial aid. These are local institutional policy decisions. Each college will determine the forms that they require, when students submit them, if it needs to come with the application or after. So really want to push you to help students get familiar and comfortable with navigating each college's website and knowing where the financial aid information is and how to kind of interpret the policies listed there. Next slide. Alrighty, and just a few quick updates here. So, and if one more click, and I think maybe there might be some animation there, we'll see. There we go, alrighty. So the e-TASFA or electronic TASFA has been delayed. That was expected to launch this fall ahead of the upcoming application cycle, but during the last legislative session, a delay was approved, and now that is on track to release next fall in October 2022, ahead of the 23-24 application cycle. This was to coincide with the simplified, the FAFSA Simplification Act. So apologies for that delay there. The intention will be to integrate this data through the e-TASFA or electronic statewide TASFA with the Apply Texas Counselor Suite data. So something positive to look forward to next year. And then just a quick note, the current year or 2022-23 paper TASFA, meaning the one coming out this October, will be available by this October. That gets posted to collegeforalltexans.com. You can also search for it through Google or through the coordinating board's website. And the selective service questions are still going to appear on the TASFA application this year, and they still will impact a student's eligibility for aid. There was talk about changing that, but that did not happen during the last legislative session. So students will still need to answer the question, provide proof that they have registered or are exempt. Next slide here. And just a quick note, if students are not yet 18, want to make sure that they understand that they do not have to register. There is this option here. Thank you, Laura. I see the arrow highlighting it. They can click that they are under the age of 18 and not required to register. And that will be the case. They will not need to provide proof even if they are turning 18 that year. In subsequent years, of course, they'll need to provide the proof. You can go on. Alrighty, and just a quick tip, students, if they do not have a social security number, will need to actually complete a printed copy of the selective service registration form and mail it in to the selective service system. So definitely encourage you to pick up, if possible, these forms from your local post office and have them available. If you are a high school counselor, keep them in your office, or another educator, keep them in your room. Otherwise, bring them to financial aid events and just make it easy for students to apply if they do need to. And quickly here, want to make sure we have enough time for questions, but I will quickly touch on this new website that we have developed. So talk about the financial aid graduation requirement website. We have been working with TEA, as Josie mentioned earlier, to create this web-based toolkit. It has 4 different pages or separate toolkits, each tailored to different audiences: counselors and advisors, community partners, families, and of course, our students. And within each web page, try to keep things pretty simple, but you will find an explanation of the graduation requirement that's written in plain language, tailored to each audience, meaning it's the same information in each, but we really tried to highlight what was most relevant and useful for the particular audience on the web page. We've also curated a collection of different tools and resources for each audience to leverage in their completion efforts or to support the students themselves in actually completing their application. And we also have tips and other advice that pulls in different best practices to really simplify the financial aid process and hopefully make things easy for everyone involved in this effort this school year. Alrighty, and so as mentioned, we have those tools and resources. Some of them are pulled from external websites, again, trying to collect what is most relevant and high quality for our users. We also have created a few new printable resources that you can use. Here we have highlighted a snapshot from our financial aid event planning guide, a simple guide for counselors and advisors, overview of all of the tools and materials you'll need for an event, a checklist to keep you organized, and then different forms that you can print out and distribute to students to help them get their questions answered during an event or during an advising session. And lastly, again, mentioning that tips and advice. So each page is going to offer a few milestones that we suggest the audience strive to meet to successfully complete this requirement. And within each of those milestones, we provide you, again, with suggested strategies to actually satisfy the milestones. So maybe real world examples to draw from if you're looking for creative new ways to support your students, or questions to think through during the planning phase. You'll find it all. And quickly, this is housed on our website. I do believe we will be dropping a link here, but if you visit the Texas OnCourse homepage, in that educators drop-down menu at the top, we do not have it highlighted for you on screen. Apologies for that. You will see a link there. I believe right now it's also circulating on the front page. So if you go today, you will definitely not miss it. And you can go to the next slide, Laura. And also want to point out, there is a download option as well. You can download each of the toolkits, bookmark it for later, have access to it offline. So that option is available. It's going to be the same information you get on the website, but again, available for offline view. And I will turn back.
Great. No, thank you so much, Sam and Jaslyn and Josie. There's been a lot of great information that we covered. I know we had a lot. A couple people mentioned the slides were going really quickly. We will send a recording and we will also send the slide deck. I've been kind of keeping an eye on the Q&A, and I might just call out a couple of questions that maybe we can draw attention to. And I'm taking a look right now, and I think some of them have been answered privately, but we talked about tracking. Let me see here. I wanted to. There was a question about, are there any rules or policies specific to McKinney-Vento accompanied youth? Not that I am aware of. They would fall into this class of 22 as well. There's obviously some specific circumstances that maybe they would acknowledge on the FAFSA. And so there's some dependency questions. So I'd have to look at that situation a little bit more closely. But they would obviously be eligible for FAFSA and federal and student aid, state aid, excuse me, as part of the financial aid process. This is the one I wanted to address, and maybe Josie, you could address this. And I think you mentioned it, but the opt-out form states that FAFSA requirement is for public and charter school students. We've had a couple of questions on whether or not this is a requirement for private school students. Josie, do you want to address that one?
Sure. So basically, all of these graduation requirements, they only do apply to public districts and charter school students. They do not apply to private. We do recognize that private schools do use a lot of the graduation requirements that TEA puts out and that the state requires. However, that is going to be based on decisions of the private school in terms of graduation requirements. These only apply to graduates of public districts and charters.
Perfect, Josie. Thank you so much. I see a question from Terry Nash. Will there be a way to check on Common App or Coalition for FAFSA completion? Common App and also the Coalition application do not have financial aid counselor suite type tools in either of their applications. So it would be surprising if you had a student that just used the Common application or the Coalition. Chances are they may have an Apply Texas application. So that's how you would see their financial aid. But those tools are not located within Common App or Coalition. So if a student was only using those two applications, that might be an example of where you would use the proof that Josie mentioned, where it has been submitted or a screenshot or something like that.
Well, and also just to let you know, the financial aid information that is provided through the counselor suite, it actually is not completely tied to the application. So it is possible that you'll receive the information for FAFSA submission and completion through the counselor suite based on how the student within the FAFSA says that they belong to a certain campus. So that is how it gets routed, regardless of the application that they use. So that is somewhat good news, but that's also the reason why there's some terrible data as well going back to districts. So you should always have alternative methods of proof, because even if a student does use Apply Texas, there is a possibility, for example, if you have a high school with a very common name, that the student misidentifies the campus in which they belong. So again, it's not a guarantee. So you might get students who applied through other methods and you'll get their FAFSA data. You might not receive FAFSA information for students who did apply but accidentally put down the wrong campus.
Perfect. And I think you talked about this too, Josie, but one question that I've seen come through is, can you clarify, campuses and districts need to make the opt-out forms available to families? Is that correct? There was a question on whether or not there were any consequences on not doing that. Isn't that in statute? Or
So it is. So SB 369 did add a caveat that a student, it's more that they cannot be denied graduation if the district has not provided the opt-out form. So also we are still waiting on the commissioner's rules, again, on what the district would be obligated to do. One of the obligations, though, is that you do have to provide the opt-out form in another language, depending again on how many students, families speak those other languages. TEA has provided in Spanish. So you might not do like a huge broadcast of the opt-out form to everyone, but you do need to ensure that the opt-out form is available through those other required languages as well. So there are certain requirements for that opt-out form that districts are still responsible for.
Great. Thank you for addressing that, Josie. Jaslyn, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's actually for Josie. I saw this a couple of times, Josie. Folks are asking for students for them to opt out at the age of 18, but they need to be 18 at the time of enrollment for the academic year, or can the student opt out if they turn 18 during the school year?
So it has to just take place before graduation. So a great question. A student, all of these codes, by the way, they have up to their graduation to get that completion done. So whether or not it is an application or if they opt out, again, when they wait and turn 18, again, that date of when they met the application requirement is the only thing that's required for TREX, but otherwise it just has to take place prior to graduation.
Great. And then there was a question about the Applied Texas Counselor Suite. Since the application for students change, will the Counselor Suite also change and have a new URL? The answer is yes. As soon as it becomes available, we'll make sure that we share that information and also have it available in our toolkit of resources that we have on our website. I also saw a question about whether or not the resources are available in Spanish. We are working to have the family resources available in Spanish, and those will be available soon.
And thank you, Jocelyn. And then I'm just trying to hit the high points. I realize we have a lot of information to cover. Betsy mentioned districts do not report FAFSA status in 21-22 school year in PEAMS. Is that correct, Josie?
So the way that PEAMS works is it's going to be for the graduates. Graduate data for, like, for example, the 21-22 graduates, that data is not going to come to TEA until fall of 2022. So districts should be collecting information on these graduates for PEAMS. Technically, that data does not get reported, though, until the fall, just like with all of the additional information on graduates.
Correct, but the information that you covered in reporting does happen this school year, correct?
Yeah, so TREX, that occurs now for the school year and for the 22, the 22 graduates, that will be reported in fall of 2022.
Okay.
But there are no FAFSA data for this coming fall in PEAMS. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Josie, Jocelyn, and Sam. I know we've had a lot of people in the chat ask us for even the information in the chat. So we'll put all of this information together and add some questions for you and share the slides and share the information. I want to be conscious of everyone's time because we're wrapping up here by 11 a.m. Our October webinar is on October 12th at 10 a.m. And we had a webinar last year, CCMR in your district, that was widely used and widely viewed. We had lots of registrants, and we highlighted just CCMR and district worked on college, career, and military readiness. And so we're going to do a 2.0 version in October. And I will go ahead and drop that in the chat. But if you are under the educators tab on our website, you can go to our webinars page, and we have all of the webinars there through fall semester, and then we will get the spring webinars up as well. So I also want to say these are going to go on YouTube, so our webinars are there. And thank you all so much for your participation, your questions. We put a lot of thought into the topics that we cover and the guest speakers that we have. So we will email all of the follow-up and address all of the things that we mentioned in the webinar, and hopefully we'll see you in October and for the rest of the year. So take care, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.